Hello everybody and welcome to Organian's Puzzle Box. What you see here is I've got my Unreal Engine asteroid field made in Niagara with my Niagara particles. These are basically static meshes, asteroids that are nanite and are spinning around the world like you see in here. So what we've done is we've created a system that allows us to control the size and radius and scope of the asteroid. So for example, I can load up multiple asteroids. I can change like the radius at which they're being pushed out. So as you can see now, they're being pushed out more into space. We also have like a dust cloud. We've got a second ring there of asteroids that are spinning in the center, and they're basically able to rotate on their own axis as well. So if I reduce this back so we can see them over here, you'll notice that these asteroids are moving through the scene and they are able to like rotate ever so slightly. Now you can obviously push these settings to the extreme. These asteroids are not collision enabled, which means that they will not collide with each other or collide with other things, because I'm trying to keep it, very efficient. So I might actually make an update onto this into the future where basically we will be able to like collide with them. I mean, that's definitely something that I can add. What is important here to note is that this project is available for you to download in the description below. So just take a look at that if you want to play around with the settings yourselves. But if not, we're just going to continue on making this from scratch just so you can see how you can do it. Also, the mesh for this is included. So if you want to have a mesh of an asteroid, a high quality mesh, then feel free to get it from the description below. Also, if you are interested in seeing the asteroid field in all of its glory and all the bells and whistles, I do have the asteroid field project on the marketplace of Unreal Engine. I'll link it in the description if you're interested in that. But let's begin. So in a brand new scene, what you want to do is add a directional light or maybe just a point light. So we can actually play around with a point light just to start it off, and just leave that somewhere in the center of the world, which is, just fine, just to keep it there. And then we want to create a Niagara system. So we can just click on creating a Niagara system. Now we can basically go with an empty one, a new system for selected emitters, or create an empty system. So we can press that, and then we'll call this NS Asteroid. Okay, and if you double click it, you will be able to open a new panel which allows you to edit the Niagara system. Now in here it's going to be empty, so we're going to start adding our first Niagara spawner, which will allow us to generate these meshes that are floating around. With the Niagara system open, we can right click and press the add emitter button, and then in here we'll select an empty, which will add our empty system. Now what's important is that you have a look over here on the right side where you can start changing settings, and you can actually click these individually to see just those open, but if you click the emitter itself, it'll just show you all the options. And in here we have the life cycle mode. You want to change this to self. So we're actually, it's got a life cycle that's not adjacent, it's not related to any system or anything like that. Then we're going to leave this option the way it is. So let the particles finish. We'll have a loop behavior of infinite, and then a loop duration. We'll do that probably around 1,000 for now. The next thing you want to do is leave the scalability to system as you see it in here. And then we want to add a spawn count. And in order to do this, we can actually press this plus button over here where, like you can do it here, or actually for the spawn count, you want to do it in this particular section for the emitter update. So if you press the plus button here, it will ask you what are you trying to add. So the first thing we want to do is basically do a spawn burst instantaneous, or again, now you see it has basically selected it, and this will spawn one particle or one mesh or whatever you want to call it, and basically it will have a spawn time of 0. Now the reason why this is important now is because we're going to set up a custom parameter here to say exactly how many spawns we want to have. So let's just leave this to 100 for now. The next we want to do is press this plus button again and add a spawn rate as well. And then with the spawn rate, we want to change this to a 0.1 as a value, and we'll leave that as it is there. After that's done, so we got the spawn rate and the spawn instantaneous. By the way, you can move these around if you want into this Niagara system. The next thing we want to do is look at the particle spawn. So this one, we can set up a few things like, for example, the life and things like that of the actual attribute of the actual particles. So I'm going to click on the particle spawn. I'm going to select the initialize particle in here that you're seeing. And this is basically where we can select things like life mode, how much the life should be, how long it should be. So we're going to set this to 1,000. So after about 1,000 frames, the particle will despawn, but we're trying to create like an even flow, so these asteroids disappear and appear without really noticing them. Once that's done, we can have a look over here where it says, mesh scale mode. So we're going to put this to basically to uniform, and we're going to leave this to 1, but we will be changing this to a custom parameter later on. Now, the next thing we want to do is basically have a look down here to play around with further setting, like for example, what shape the particles are spawning into. Also, if we need any initial forces onto it or any initial mesh orientation. So we're going to actually press the plus button over here and look for shape. And this is gonna, well, ask us here, what sort of location we want, what shape location. So we're gonna press the shape location and change this from a sphere to a torus, which will mean that now we have the shape of a torus that's going to be generated for this. Again, the radius in here, we're going to do that as a sort of like a user parameter. And then we have the handle radius, which again, we're going to be using a user parameter. There's nothing else that you need to do about this torus unless you want to look at, well, when you look at the torus distribution mode, you can leave that to random. I wouldn't really change anything there, and definitely don't change anything here to the transform button. You don't need to play around with that. Now we want to apply some initial forces. So this is important because this will allow our asteroids to travel in a certain direction straight off the bat as they spawn. And we're going to leave this to apply force to velocity, apply rotational force to rotational velocity, to rotational force. Just leave that as it is. You don't really have to do anything there. Then we can add a initial, so I'm just going to press the plus button here, initial mesh orientation. And with that done, we can actually have a look at these options where it says mesh orientation mode, and you may want to, like, for example, set that up to something like, specific. So you could say, you've got plenty of options in here. But I think, well, the best one here would be orientation to vector. So when it says orientation vector, just leave that to 1, and then this one, mesh axis to orient, leave that to 1 as well. Then you're going to have this where you can press the rotation, and then the rotation can be left as a mesh. And you may want to do here a minimum and maximum value. So the way I would do this, you could switch this over to a minimum. Sorry. Actually, it will say you have to select value. Let me just see, range, random range vector. There we go. And we will do a -1, -1, -1, and leave the other ones to 1, 1, 1. So we're basically limiting this rotation to these values. So we can either go, basically can, so what you got to understand is when you spawn these asteroids, they will basically be static if you don't do this. But if you do this, it just adds a random spin to all of them. So they're all kind of rotating in various different ways on their pivot. So that's going to make a ton of a difference in the way this looks. Now we're moving on to the, to the particle update. And before we actually go there, I would like us to change our render. So what do we got here? The sprite renderer. We can actually delete that and add instead a mesh renderer. And this is going to allow us to load a mesh in here. Now, if we have a look in the world and we actually drop the, sorry, I need to drop the system that we just made. So I'm just going to put it in here and then make sure that it's actually in the center of the world like that. Now, obviously, right now, the light source, I'm going to increase that slightly just so we can actually see a light source in there. Let me just make the system a little bit bigger here as well. When we select the mesh renderer, we can actually drop a mesh right here. So I'm going to type in asteroid, and I'm hopefully going to be able to find one. And there we go. I've got an asteroid right there. So I've added my asteroid, and as you can see, it's like created this big ball, and that's because the asteroid has a scale. So we've got to actually work out what the scale of our asteroid is. So if we go back into the initialized particles in here, we can actually change the scale to make it smaller. Now, I'm gonna like go into where the point light is, and I'm gonna make this even smaller. Now you can see the asteroid is right there around the light. This is a very tiny scene, so for now we're just gonna keep it that way until we actually make it bigger. But you can see the asteroid spawning in there. Now that light is definitely a bit too strong, so maybe, yeah, maybe tone it down. We do need to sort of like push them away from the center. So we're going to select our shape location here where it says Taurus. And I'm going to push this over to like 1,000 or something like that. And then doing it at 1,000 means that the asteroids are no longer visible. So what we need to do now is with that point light selected, we do need to increase our light ability, but also our attenuation radius. So you can see now we're able to see the asteroid. It's still too bright, so actually that was a bad idea to make it that bright. There we go. Now we have it in front. Let's have a look a bit closer to how our asteroids look like. And I do think I need to slow down this camera because it's getting in the way. Okay, so we can see the asteroids over there spawned. They're not moving. They're not really going anywhere. They're not doing anything because we're not really applying any initial sort of, I mean, we're applying some initial force, but there's no velocity to move them around. We do need to play around with those settings and you know, set up the rest of the system now. Now to get the system moving and rotating and so on, we're going to, in our particle update over here, we are going to start adding, I mean, we're going to select the particle state just to make sure that when particles, you know, when their life expires, they elapse. If you don't do this, you're just going to get more and more particles spawning to the point where it becomes, you know, basically you reach the limit and you'll have too many asteroids in the scene. So it's important that you actually do kill them off, you know, very slowly, but you do have to kill them. Now, after that, we're going to press this plus button over here and we are going to add a vortex, vortex, not vertex, vortex velocity. Now this, it says in here, we've got an issue. We're just going to click this fix issue. You might not actually even see it, but just press that button over there when you do it, when you see it, in order to fix it. And then with the vortex velocity selected, we have in here a, you know, a velocity amount. So you can actually change this to a random range float. And I would put this between 100 to 5,000. And now you can see they're actually starting to rotate, which is quite nice. Now we're going to leave this to spawn only, but then we have this thing where it says vortex axis. So again, I'm going to change this to a random range vector. And I'm not actually going to change any of this stuff as of yet, but what I will do is I will put everything to a 0 and maybe do something like that. But you can see now they're going backwards and forwards. So if you leave that to a 0, they're just going to go in one direction. We are going to make custom points here. Now, very important to understand is also the fact that you will see here that they only add stuff at spawn only. So these settings only affect the system when the system is spawn, when these asteroids are spawning. So none of these asteroids will change their velocity after they've been spawned until they die and new ones come in. So this is again going to help you to create a bit of randomness within the movement over time. Now, what we're going to do is we're also going to be adding a mesh rotation force. So I'm going to press this button here and select mesh rotation force. And with that done, we can now have a look over here into the, you know, when do we want to sample this? Is this a simulation? And, you know, like, is this, you know, we can change this again to a random range vector, and we can evaluate it every frame, for example. So what happens is every frame, it's looking at the values and deciding what it's going to basically, you know, how is it going to rotate? And right now you can see them rotating, and what happens is randomly they could decide to stop rotating or change their values. Now these values obviously for rotation are extremely high, so we could do something less, maybe something like that. Now one thing to note is that we are going to make these into custom values as well. Now all the custom values will show up in here, and we will get there in just a little bit. Now, if we select the solve forces and velocity, you don't really have to do anything there, but if you need to, you can actually add some limits to how much the system can accelerate and how much it can decelerate and so on while it's doing this. Now, again, what we're seeing here is a system that's quite random and quite unpredictable. So obviously playing around with the settings and making sure they're no longer random values, that can help you to have a predictable effect. Like, for example, maybe you want this to always, like, like the vortex axis to always be, move in the same direction at the same speed, and the minimum and the maximum can be a 1, and that's it, right? Now, what we're going to do is, initially, we're going to look at the mesh uniform scale. So if we select this and we type in read from new user parameter, so we can see it's created one right over here on this side. So let me just take these panels a little bit, and you can see it right over here. So what this means is, if we select the system in the world, so if we select the system over here, you'll notice that now we have a mesh uniform scale. So we can actually play around with these figures, which is quite nice, right? And you can also rename them. So if you select the edit hierarchy and you select it over here, you can actually right click. Actually, you can't do it here. You have to right click over here and call this. So we could just say asteroid size, right? Or asteroid scale, or whatever you want to call it. So that's where we got asteroid size. You can then add sections as well if you'd like. So, for example, you can add a category or a section. So this could be asteroid 01, right? And then we can drop this. Actually, I think I need to add a new category. So asteroid, maybe we'll call this asteroid properties or something like that, right? And we should then be able to drag this in here. So now asteroid size, that is to asteroid properties, which is part of the asteroid 01. So if we have a look at the system again, let me just close this off and drag this away. We will now see, when we select it, that we do have asteroid properties. So asteroid 01, asteroid properties. I do think I haven't actually linked the this particular asteroid properties to this. Actually, I might have done. Oh yeah, I think I did. Yeah, so there we go. Now it's only showing up in there. So that's okay. So in asteroid 1, we have the asteroid property, so that's great. Okay, so that's one thing that we can do. Now, what I'm also going to be doing here is I'm going to show you guys how to basically pick between two different asteroids. Now, in order for us to choose between two different asteroids, we will need to add the second one in here. So what we're going to do is add another mesh renderer. And then we want to add in here this mesh. So I'm just going to search for it. And then I'm going to go into here and make sure that I've added it. Right, so now we have a second one, but the system doesn't really know how to pick between the two of them. Actually, this is the same mesh, so we're going to have to actually select another one. And as you can see right now, it's just basically, it's adding the meshes randomly, but it doesn't really know how to select and by what sort of, like what's kind of the number that's making them spawn, and why are they, they're all spawning in the same place, and just a bunch of different problems with it. I'm also going to be scaling down the asteroid to maybe like something like that, just to make them smaller and more readable, hopefully, as we do this. So what we're going to do is, with the first one selected, we're going to make sure that the render visibility tag is set to 0, and this other one is set to 1. So that's going to give us the ability to then pick between the two asteroids as they're being sort of like, spawned into the world. So we're going to actually use that particular number to like have a look to see which one we want to spawn randomly, basically. Okay, so the question is, how do we do this? How do we select between the two meshes? Well, randomly, that is, when we spawn them. So that's quite easy. What we're going to do is we're going to click this button over here. It says parameters. And over here in particle attributes, you won't be seeing this visibility tag, but basically if you press the plus button and search for the visibility tag, you will be able to add it in and then drag and drop it over here like that, right in the particle spawn. So whatever happens here is always when the particles are spawning. That's why we apply initial mesh rotation and forces, so that these asteroids, when they spawn, they don't all look the same and basically spawn in the same way. Now, with that done, over here, we can now change this to a random range int, and that will basically change it to this particular integer between 0 and 1. So now we're sampling between the asteroid 0 and asteroid 1. So now this is working as intended. Now all we want to do is basically look at making sure that we can load up whatever asteroid we want when we want it. So we're going to click over here, and we're able to change this through the user parameter as well. So for us to define each asteroid, we're going to have to create two asteroid static mesh samplers. So over in here, we're going to press the plus button and we're going to search for static mesh. Very importantly, do not click the one for the data interface, click the one for the object. Once you click it, just name it however you want. So I'm going to put it Aster01. I'm also going to press the button again and then again look for static mesh. Again for the object one, Aster02. Now with these two done, we can then set them up in here. So right now the asteroids have obviously got a mesh in there. That's fine. I mean, you can put that to nothing if you'd like. But what we're going to do is we're going to press this button for the first mesh render. And over here, we're going to be pressing this button, this arrow. So not the one over here where the mesh is, the other one underneath. And select Aster01. And then over here, we're going to select the second mesh render. Press the arrow again and select Aster02. And now it's obviously still loading the asteroids that are still on these slots, but if we remove them, we wouldn't have any asteroids. But if we have a look into our scene here, into the world, you'll notice that now we have two slots. So let's say I type in there asteroid, and then I select, I don't know, this asteroid, for example. And then if I select this one, again, look for an asteroid, and I'm going to add this one. So now the asteroids have been changed to the new meshes that we've just loaded up. So these are the new meshes. And that's really neat. Now the next thing we want to do is work out the thickness of the asteroid field. So this is quite easy. Let me show you how that functions as well. So what you're going to do here is you're going to select the torus. And where you have the large radius, that's something that we will turn into a user parameter. So read from the user parameter. We're going to leave it as large radius. It's fine. You know, it's not really a problem. And then when it says handle radius, we're going to do a random range float. And then we're going to put a user. So we're going to read from the user parameter, and we're going to, that's a minimum handle, and this is going to be a maximum handle. Okay. Now, what happens into the system here, if we start playing around with this setting, let's say the radius is going to bring the radius of the torus down or up. And then if we play around with the actual handle radius, so we've got a minimum. I can't see the maximum for some reason in here. That's a bit odd. Oh, sorry. I think I have basically should have created a new parameter. There we go. Now we have it. So if we start playing around with the radius, let's say we increase the maximum radius by quite a little bit, you'll now notice that the asteroid field starts to take a better shape because we're actually starting to see them not hit each other and they're actually floating about like that. Now let's just increase the size maybe to 0.3, but also we do need more spawn in. So what we do is when we have the spawn a burst instantaneous in here, we can actually look at the spawn count and read that as well from the parameter. I will obviously leave you guys to sort out the hierarchy in whatever way you want, but the included Niagara system in the description below will have a nice, neat setup. So now that we have the spawn count added to 100, we can actually set this maybe to like 300. So now we have 300 asteroids spinning around, and this is very performant. All of these asteroids are nanite. Our lighting is a bit too harsh though, so I am going to have to tone this down to maybe like 1,000. There we go. Now this looks way better. Now again, our initial forces of rotation and so on are pretty high, so we can actually have a look. Not initial, sorry, just the usual one. So we can have a look here to add some new user parameters. So that's going to help with the rotation, and then the vortex as well. I am probably going to be looking at, well, actually, I think I'll leave these as they are. But now with that done, we can have a look at how, you know, how much is this rotating? Because if I increase this, you'll see that they're just going to start spinning like crazy, right? If we put this to a 0.001, they should be rotating, but a lot slower. Now, bear in mind, this is sampled every frame, so it's not on spawn, it's actually every frame, which means that, you know, if you remember in here, we did set it up to every frame, which means that you will be getting some a random rotation from time to time, depending on the value that you got in there. But these asteroids will keep on doing this for as long as they, you know, you allow them to. And again, you can play around with the setting and increase the velocity and so on. Now, bear in mind that this velocity setting in here is based on how big the system is. So if the system is bigger, let's say we make it, the radius to be this big, right? And we're actually going to make them bigger, the asteroids, so we can actually see them. So now the velocity is even lower. So you will have to have a look at increasing this in order to make it go faster, right? So again, the bigger the system, the slower it will get. So let's just get back to our initial settings. Something like that. Okay. So yeah, that's basically how we get this done, how we get the asteroid field done. Now, there's also the idea of how to set up a very simple sort of like dust, smoke, cloud kind of thing around it as well. So it's literally kind of the same thing, but instead of using a mesh render, we're actually just using a sprite render. So it's basically just running a material. I'm going to put that in the description below anyway. It's going to be part of the project as well. I don't want to overextend this tutorial, so I'm not going to do that particular bit. Just so you know, basically, all you would do here is create another one of these systems. You could literally copy paste it. So now you have two systems. And then instead of having a mesh render down here, you'd be deleting these. And instead, you'd basically add a sprite render. And at that point, you load up the material with whatever system you may have. Let's say a texture material that's like a dust cloud or something like that. So once you put that in there, you can then play around again with the sizes and so on, and make sure that you got these user parameters that you're changing. Now, the user parameters can be the same as for the asteroids, since you're already like, the dust will follow the asteroids basically. So that's fine. But that's how I would do it in order to finish it off. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I think it's quite worth your while, because you can do a lot of things with this. You don't just have to make a ring. Like, you could just make this into a sphere. So as an example, and then the asteroids will be a sphere. And and again, the sphere, you can increase the radius, and look at that. That's quite cool, right? This is going to be one of those things where it looks really cool. And if you decrease the point light strength to maybe like 100 or something like that, I think it will actually look quite good. Then you can add some volumes in this as well to make them spin around. And then get some nice sort of like volumetric effects as well. But I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you did. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. I am planning on doing a 3-part tutorial, where the next one is going to be about custom gravity. And then the next tutorial is going to be about sort of like a space scene, creating a planet scene with asteroids and all the likes. So hope you guys will tune in for that, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.